Listen up. It's time for a politically entertaining exclusive interview.
Today's guest, his resume, I would say, reads like a stock resume that you may find on the internet. This brother is into all type of things. He has expertise in politics, gender, and race studies. He's also a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Brandon R. Davis, thank you for making time for us today, man.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to try to talk about a variety of things, man. This question I'm about to ask you, I usually hate hearing during the interview because it's kind of a broad question, but I figured that you could handle it and give a good specific answer to it, man. In your words, can you explain this whole Trump phenomenon as far as candidates in the past, when they make a gaffe like he makes, they usually have to do the mea culpa and come and apologize and really walk back their statements. This guy says a lot of outrageous things, and he continues to move up in the polls. He's won the Republican nomination. A lot of people have tried to tell us that if, people are angry. I tend to disagree with that, but we've been fed the excuse that people are angry and upset, and that's why they're dealing with him. In your words, can you explain what has allowed him to be so different from every other candidate we've ever seen?
Yeah, well, Trump is a product of what the Republican Party has been pushing for the past several election cycles. The Republican Party, their primary system, even the Democratic primary system, is geared towards the hardcore pundits, right, or the hardcore partisan individuals. And the Republican Party, over the past few election cycles, has fueled these single-issue voters, who people who are just for no immigration, just for no abortion, just for no social programs, or just for these certain one topic or single issue things. And Trump is the culmination of them consistently feeding this xenophobia, this racism, this isolationism in the basement, and finally the thing in the basement has burst out. And it's burst out in the form of Donald Trump. Now, I believe personally that Donald Trump is smarter than what we think he is. And I think Donald Trump saw that opportunity and seized on it. I think that the Republican Party has been, just undertones of racism, undertones of xenophobia, undertones of these types of things, and their party has picked up on it. Because these have been the people who have been pushing or getting closer to Trump's type of politics throughout at least the last two presidential cycles. You can think of people like some of the hardcore Republicans like Huckabee, or hardcore Republicans
like Pat Buchanan, one of them.
There was just hardcore religious right people who have been pushing these types of issues, and he's just been able to catch the wave at the crescendo.
In your answer, you said you believe he's a lot smarter than we think, and to a certain extent, I guess you're saying that he saw a niche that he could capitalize on. That kind of reminds me of what I heard of Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, and that I've heard people say that he's not even really a conservative, but he saw the MSNBCs and the CNNs, and he saw a lane for conservative right-wing news, and he started Fox News, and he doesn't even really believe all of that stuff, but he saw a great money maker, and that's kind of, I got some of that with your Trump answer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just agreeing with you.
Okay, I was going to move to the other side of the political spectrum, on the Democratic side. The main thing we've heard with Hillary Clinton is people don't trust her, that she's a liar. Now, people that follow politics, we know that pretty much all politicians lie. I was wondering if you could speak to why that has stuck to her so much, because people will bring up Benghazi and this whole email thing, but people have said this about Hillary long before Benghazi, long before the email scandal. What is the one lie that she told that is stuck to her? Like, why? Is it because she's a female that may become the first female president? Like, why has this stuck with her and And all other politicians, they seem to kind of move past it.
Well, I would agree with what you said originally, that she's a woman, and because she's a woman, these types of mythology and fables that they come up with to surround her with just stick better. I mean, there's no person who's been a greater flip-flopper than Mitt Romney, but nobody calls Mitt Romney a liar. And just because she's a woman, she's more not acceptable, but she's more you're more able to call her a liar. Like when the person in Congress called Obama a liar, right? That wouldn't be possible for a white president. No white congressional person would stand up and call a white president a liar. But because she's in a different social position, her social identity is different. Being a woman, it's just that those things are able to stick more. I don't think she's more dishonest than any other politician. I think that she's a very capable, very ambitious person, and I think that simply because she's a woman, these types of epithets are better able to stick to her. Because think about Trump, right? Trump says things left, right. He says things up, down. Nobody calls him a liar, right? Nobody uses those type of terminology when it comes to talking to her. But when it comes to general public and like when you do polling data, people believe her to be a liar simply because people say it, and it's easier to stick to her than it is other politicians, or male politicians, I should say.
That's a very interesting point, Brandon, that you brought up as far as the social the context that people exist in. And very, I don't know if you had a chance to hear it. I know it's been making the internet break. Jesse Williams' speech at the BET Awards. Coming from the position you're in, you have a lot of publications where you talk about race and positioning of genders and ethnicities in the scope of America and how things are being done. Like, what was your take on his speech? I know initially some people were really like, yeah, it's really good, and some people were trying to rebut it. But just what is your take on what he said, and more importantly, what do you think people can do in a day-to-day? Because after you hear a speech like that, you're like, yeah, that sounds really good, but then you go back to, like, doing whatever you do, and you're not really making a difference. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I listened to the speech. I thought it was really good. I thought he really prepared for it. I thought it was a really good speech. I thought he hit a lot of really good points. A lot of the rebuttals, I think, deal with more inconsistencies or, incongruencies between us. Colorism is a very powerful divisive agent, and I think that if we buy into this idea that if you're lighter or darker that you have some more to say about an issue than another person in the same race, I think we're falling victim to the same type of divisive or racist type of techniques that are used to divide a group. Now, as far as where we go from here, is a very difficult question, right? Because we're talking about how do individuals reshape institutions within this nation. We're talking about how we reshape criminal justice to where it doesn't target people of color. We're talking about how we reshape education to whereas poor kids don't get the short end of the stick simply because they're poor. And so those big questions or those big concerns, I think, are policy issues. And when you're talking about addressing something like that on a macro level, you first have to get the policymakers or the people who are going to, and the people who are going to implement these policies to recognize and also to acknowledge that racism exists, right? That classism exists, and that these are the things that are fueling these policies that cause so much, cause so many disparities between these social groups.
I mean, I think that's a great point. You said the people that are in a position to make policies, and one of the things me and Byron talk about, if you ever listened to the show previously, we talk about people voting in local elections, and I think that people are going to be looking at saying, okay, I got to vote for Trump or I got to vote for Hillary. The president is a big deal, certainly, because, they have access to nuclear weapons, and I think that's not to be understated. But from a standpoint of your day-to-day life, I think when you looked at the Ferguson situation and you wrote a publication on it, I have not read it, but I definitely saw that you had written one, and I'm pretty sure that you understand the situation is it had happened where this police chief and the district attorney were elected in a community where people weren't voting, and they weren't even being represented. They were being represented by somebody who they hadn't even elected because they hadn't voted. There was a very low voter turnout in the minorities in Ferguson. And I do believe subsequently after this happened that some of those people have been removed from office after people had voted. So just the idea to me that I don't think it's underscored enough that people, I guess, vote. Do you tell young people, when you're speaking with them about the importance of voting, especially in local elections, and understanding who the candidates are and not just going and checking a box or not voting at all?
Yeah, I do. My dissertation is well, the first part is on participation or voting, and the second part is on how institutions affect your interpersonal or even like mental health well-being. And voting is very important, especially on the local level. And when you speak about Ferguson, it's very, very interesting because Ferguson is like almost 70% black, and it's been supermajority black for over 15 years. And we have to look and see how can a city that's 70% black have a white mayor, 50 or 54 police officers white, a completely white municipal court system. How is that possible, right? And the argument I make is that the criminal justice system in Ferguson was targeting African Americans for profit through municipal court fines and penalties and fees. And when you do that, when you target a group of people with an institution like the criminal justice system, you can effectively reduce their what we call political efficacy, which is trust in government, amongst other things, and make them not feel like their participation will produce politicians that will reflect their interests, political interests, and you can push down their participation rate, so their turnout rates when it comes to vote. So it's very vital to vote. It's very vital to vote also in municipal elections because, like you just said, the government that touches you most is the government that's closest to you. So your local elections, your state elections are very vital because these are the people who are going to make the policies you live on a daily basis. Now, the federal government does have an overarching reach when it comes to how we live our lives. Supreme Court, things like that are very important. But like simple things like traffic codes or certain types of crimes or state crimes. And if we don't vote the right people in, the right judges in some states, then we can be, all municipalities can turn out something like Ferguson, where you have a minority, 30% of the population, controlling the political apparatus that then targets a certain group of people for profit or just for malice.
We are talking to Brandon Davis. For those of you who listened to the past episode with Orazio Maccarella when we talked finance and credit, he is actually Orazio's line brother on Omega Sci-Fi, the Qs. So we definitely thank you, Brandon, for making time for us. I wanted to stick on what you wrote about Ferguson, and the title of that article was Ferguson: The Latest Front in the State's War on Black Community. It was it was published in the Pan Am Post. I'm going to post it to our Facebook page for those of you that are interested in watching this. It's a great read, Brandon. It has some statistics in there that I didn't know as far as New York stop and frisk. I mean, overwhelming, numbers in that article. You talked a lot about the militarization of the police department. And my thing is this. When police departments, when they buy this equipment, they have to train with it. And when you train with it, to me, it creates this certain mindset of a us versus them war mentality. It's like they're soldiers on our local streets. So it goes from kind of the whole protect and serve to the let's go crack some heads and handcuff some people and arrest them. And like I said, it creates this us versus them. Me and Frank a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the latest shooting in Mobile, Alabama. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, with Michael Moore.
I am.
My question to you is, the things that you noted in your article as far as the limited contact that a lot of these officers have with minorities, and like I said, with the whole us versus them mentality, do you think that outweighs any potential racial views that they may have? Because a lot of times when these shootings occur, we always say, well, the cop was racist. And that may be true, but do you also think it's that whole mentality that's created with the whole militarization of these police departments, and like you stated in your article, just not having a lot of contact with minorities and knowing how to deal with them?
Yeah, well, I think it's two parts. I think one part is that criminality has been effectively linked to blackness. So that when you see a black person, especially a young black male, you automatically think that they're up to no good, right? When we don't have the same kind of thoughts when we see a group of white young males together. And I think that adds to it to a certain extent, that criminality has been so effectively ingrained into blackness, that black is criminal, black people are criminal, right? That even when we talk about social programs, when you think about when in the 80s they talked about the welfare queen and things like that, that was a black type of image, right? So we think of black people always cheating the system and are committing some type of criminal activity, when in fact that's not true, that white people commit more crimes, white people do more drugs, and that that idea, that mythology surrounding blackness as criminal fueled lots of lynchings post-Reconstruction and during Reconstruction and things like that. And I think that the militarization adds to the trigger happiness of local law enforcement. If I get a tank, if I get some type of militarized weapon, if I get automatic like machine gun type firearms and things, then I start using them, right? Then you see those types of things used in regular policing, right? Regular pullovers for certain things. You see those types of things used when serving warrants, and just adds to the likelihood that someone will get killed. It's a great book called The Rise of the Warrior Cop by Radley Bilko, who writes the Washington Post, that documents how this happens. And when you give people these types of things, they want to use them, and it's pretty much free, right? The federal government is giving these local law enforcement departments, right? Your podunk or your small town is getting tens of thousands of dollars in free militarized equipment from the federal government, in order to just police the streets as regular. I think a good example of that was after the tragedy in Boston, when we had the terrorist attack. You saw the police come out in all these militarized vehicles, all this militarized equipment, and it creates an air of fear, and it creates an air where if I got it, I should be supposed to use it, right? I'm supposed to use this. If they gave it to me, I'm supposed to use it, and the people I'm supposed to use it against are criminals, which are more likely to be characterized as people of color. If it's not African Americans, it's Hispanics, and now most recently it's people of Middle Eastern descent.
Brandon on here speaking that real today. He is you're a young voices advocate, and as we stated, you published quite a couple of articles in Pan Am, also one in The Hill. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm going to get you out of here with one last question, and I'm going to see if we agree or disagree on this. We're talking about, police officers when they shoot unarmed teens, but not necessarily just police officers, because with Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman wasn't a police officer, but he did wind up killing him, and also with Michael Dunn when he shot Jordan Davis. So, but usually when this happens, to me, there becomes two different sides of black people in their arguments, and you have the side that, they're outraged at what happened and they want to hold the police accountable. Then you have the other side that says, well, what about black-on-black crime? I don't see you guys marching and speaking up when black people kill other black people. I want to get your answer on what side are you on as far as that argument goes, and in your own words, why the other side is wrong or at the very least misguided in their viewpoint.
Well, I'll say that of all of those black people who were killed by law enforcement or vigilantes of the such, committing a crime is not a death. It's not a death sentence for any type of crime other than murder, right? So there is no lawful reason to kill someone because they committed any type of crime. That's just period. And I think that because of this investment in criminality and the blackness, right, that black people are so scary or so volatile that we have to use some type of lethal force. I think even the DOJ report at Ferguson shows that their police department pulled over and ticketed blacks at 90% of the tickets and pullovers, 90-something% of the uses of force, excessive force were used against blacks, 90-something% of all of the uses of tasers or something like that was against African Americans. And I think that we have to understand that, being black isn't enough of a reason in order to use this type of force. And I think that when it comes to police agencies or people talking about these types of incidents, they need to realize that African Americans are less likely to use drugs, less likely to commit crimes. We don't commit more crimes than whites or anything like that. And that the idea of black-on-black crime is a myth. People commit crime towards people that they live around. So white on thing, Asian on Asian crime is a thing, right? Asian people don't leave their enclaves and come to the black side of town or the Latino side of town or the Italian side of town to rob people. They rob people in their own little areas. So that's just how crime works. So there is really no such thing as black-on-black crime. And yes, any type of crime or any type of violence should be taken seriously, like the conditions in like Chicago and things like that, where we have a lot of crime, a lot of murders, things like that. We should look at seriously. But it's not always just that simple, right? So there are certain things that go into effect that can produce more instances of crime, right? Poverty, unemployment, even criminal justice, right? If you over-police an area, you create a situation or environment where a majority of the people can't get decent work. If you over-police a neighborhood and you're pulling everybody over and you're harassing neighbors, like with the stop and frisk that they used to have in New York, what you do is you create felons, right? You're not doing that stop and frisk in the white neighborhoods or the rich neighborhoods. You're not pulling all these cars over in the white neighborhoods or the rich neighborhoods. So what happens is you over-police an area, you create a space or an environment where lots of people have criminal records and therefore can't get work. And then you create the circumstances to where they have to do things that may not be legal to order to obtain a living. Now, am I saying that selling drugs and things like that is the right thing to do? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that over-policing can actually cause crime. And what I'm saying is that when you over-police those areas with an attitude that these black people are all criminals or these black people are all dangerous, you make an environment where it's okay to use excessive force against African Americans. It's okay to violate their civil liberties and civil rights.
The article he wrote, Ferguson, the latest front in the state's war on black community. Again, go to Politically Entertaining's Facebook page. I will post that. It's an article that you wrote about 2 years ago, but in my opinion, it still holds true today. So I encourage everyone to check it out and listen. Before you go, Brandon, if you would like, tell us what you're currently studying, what you're working on, or if you have anything as far as future plans that you hope to accomplish before you get out of here.
Oh, yeah. So I'm finishing my dissertation now, and probably two great points from my dissertation I think will be most beneficial is that I found that not only having contact with the criminal justice system, not in the sense of getting a felony where you cannot vote or you're barred from voting, but having contact in the sense of being arrested, being harassed, having to go to court for something like that, makes people less likely to vote. And it also, having the same contact, if a family member has it, not even you personally, it makes you less likely to vote. And in addition to that, it makes you more susceptible to depression, negative personal feelings, lack of happiness, increased sense of nervousness. And so the criminal justice system is a very effective tool when we talk about predation or some type of predatory state. It's a very effective tool in increasing the isolation, alienation of a group of people, and that it can be effectively used in order to silence a majority like it was used in Ferguson.
Brandon Davis, thank you again for joining us. You can follow him on Twitter. Is it at Brandon Davis?
Yes, at Brandon Davis.
Yeah, you can follow him on Twitter at Brandon. Okay, Brandon R. Davis. Yeah, at Brandon R. Davis on Twitter. Like I said, this brother, he's studying and working on a lot of things, so check him out. And we appreciate you coming on, sir.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.